The courtroom was silent, but the tension was loud. Inside a sleek global justice hall in The Hague, the U.S. Supreme Court justices were seated as part of an emergency international tribunal. Few took the session seriously. Cameras were rolling. News. Banners flashed headlines. Routine legal clarification refugee protocols. No one expected anything groundbreaking. No one expected him. Then, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked in. He didn't come with lawyers, nor stacks of papers, just a single black notebook tucked under his arm. He looked calm, dressed not in military gear, but in a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up. The moderator gave a polite nod. Captain Traoré, she sighed, "You may speak." He stood for 5 long seconds. He said nothing. Then slowly, he opened at his notebook. His voice was quiet. "This is not a refugee case," he said. "This is a question of dignity, and how easily the world forgets African pain." The room froze. A few judges leaned in. One scoffed quietly, but Traoré didn't flinch. He hadn't come to ask for pity. He had come to show the world what it had become. Traoré paused. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was crumpled, worn, clearly touched many times. He held it up. "This," he said softly, "is a picture taken last year. Niger, the Sahel, these 5 children, barefoot, exhausted, had walked 93 kilometers after their village was burned. They begged for help, but the nearest refugee center had already been closed." A few judges looked down. They were told there was no room, no papers, no legal status. His voice cracked just slightly. 2 of them died the next morning. The baby girl, her name was Awa, died in her sister's arms. A soft gasp came from the moderators. "Chair, but I'm not here to make you feel guilty," Traoré said. "I'm here to ask, would this decision be feasible if it were 5 American children lost in the desert?" The courtroom was still. The live stream chat exploded. "Who is this man? This just got real. I'm crying already." But Traoré wasn't finished. He turned the photo around. Scrolled in blue ink on the back were 5 names and a message. "Tell the world we're here." Justice Halburn, one of most conservative voices on the U.S. bench, sat motionless. He was known for never blinking during hearings. But now his jaw clenched. Captain Traoré looked directly at him. "Justice Halburn," he said, "your ruling 12 months ago claimed that undocumented immigrants from West Africa posed a manageable humanitarian issue, not a legal priority." The words hung like smoke in the air. Traoré didn't raise his voice. "May I ask, what makes pain manageable to you?" Halburn stiffened. A murmur rippled through the audience. "Step it closer. You saw numbers. I saw funerals. You saw equality. I saw children burying their mothers with bare hands." He placed the photo gently on the table in front of Halburn. The judge didn't touch it. The moderator cleared her throat. "Captain, please." "I'm not angry," Traoré said, his voice trembling. "I'm exhausted. Because you ask for humanity, and you give use categories." Halburn blinked. For the first time in his career, his eyes were wet. "This is no longer a legal hearing," a journalist tweeted. "It's a soul hearing, and the whole world was watching." The screen band tray flickered on. The slideshow began. Slide 1, a dusty camp. Slide 2, a small child kneeling beside a broken water jug. Slide 3, a mother clutching her infant as soldiers walked past. "This," Traoré said, "is Mariama Doumbia, 7 years old, Gambian, declared stateless by your ruling. She died trying to cross a river into Senegal just 3 weeks ago." He paused, breathing deeply. "Did you even see her name in the files you stamped?" One judge looked away. The moderator seemed uncomfortable. Cameras zoomed in. "Do you know what her last words were? Will I be allowed to go to school in Senegal?" Traoré gripped the sides of the podium. His voice didn't rise, but it trembled. She was 7. She thought the law would help her. He tapped his heart. She didn't know the law wasn't written for children like her. The audience was still. No whispers. Knockouts, just one sound. Justice Halburn quietly setting his pen down, and a single tear rolling down the cheek of a translator in the corner. The world was watching it for the first time. It was listening. It wasn't in the official documents. It wasn't supposed to be seen, but Traoré had it. A handwritten letter from a former refugee who'd been deported under the new ruling. He held it up for Thekamaris. "This came to me folded inside Oustbook," he said. It was smuggled out via Red Cross. Worker. He began to read to the people who decided I shouldn't be here. "I hope one day someone explains to you how it feels to beg for air, for food, and still be seen as a problem. I hope you never see your mother sold for a border pass. I'm not angry. I just want to know, what did we do so wrong that being born African means binding needs safety?" The camera cut to the judges stone-faced. One leaned back, slowly looking away from the screen. The moderator wiped her eyes and tried to speak, then stopped. "This letter is not a speech," Traoré said. "It's a testimony." He looked up. "Anthis Cork is on trial." Millions watching online began typing. "I'm sobbing. This feels too real." "He's not just speaking. He's lifting fetid." Tro's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know how many African refugees have died since your ruling waspist?" Silence. 3,082 that we know of. The number echoed through the courtroom like a bullet. He placed a list on Theatable. Names, dates, ages. "This is the law you defend. A law that hears no screams, that demands paperwork while children drown." The judges stayed still, but something shifted in the room. The mood was no longer about law or policy. It was about shame. One African delegate clenched his fists under the table. Another wiped her eyes with a tissue. "I understand law must be neutral," Traoré continued, "but when neutrality helps bury the voiceless, it becomes cruelty." He paused. "And cruelty, however legal, is stillable." The live stream chat exploded. "I've never cried watching politics bore. This is a revolution in real time. Please, someone listen to this man." And then Justice Halburn leaned forward. "Captain Traoré," he said quietly, "what do you propose we do?" Gasps filled the chamber. The world held its breath, and Traoré slowly began to answer. A photo flickered onto the courtroom screen. A young girl wearing a faded blue dress, her eyes wide, her feet bare, dust in there. Traoré's voice barely rose above a whisper. Her name was Kata. She was 14 years old. She made it as far as a refugee camp in Tunisia. She begged for papers forcibly, but your ruling had already closed the pathway. He paused. His hands trembled slightly. She was found 2 days later in a shipping container trying to reach Italy. A quiet gasp swept through the room. No one talks about her because she didn't make it. But if this hearing is truly about justice, then her voice must represent too. Tro walked up to the bench slowly. He placed a printed copy of Kata's last diary entry on the desk. She wrote, "If I die, please let Samianek know I tried to live." The moderator's lips trembled. One of African delegates silently removed her glasses to wipe her eyes. "Your honors." "Trial," Ray said, turning to the judges. "How many more will try just to be treated as human?" The courtroom was no longer just a court. It had become a graveyard of truth. The room was still recovering from Kata's story when a soft chime rang out. Call note of phone. A secured line from the UN Secretary General's office. The moderator hesitated, then answered. A whisper in her ear made her eyes widen. She stood up. "Captain Traoré, there's been a request. The Secretary General would like you to continue your testimony. Uninterrupted gasps filled the courtroom. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It had become a global moment. Traoré nodded. Then slowly he pulled out a brown envelope. These, he said, are reclassified photos from a rescue operation on the Niger border. Dozens of children, injured, hungry, undocumented, turned away due to lack of legal status after the court's decision. He spread photos on the bench. The camera zoomed in. One showed a boy with a missing leg. Another showed a young mother holding a lifeless baby. Traoré's voice was steady, but his eyes were glassy. We didn't come here for sympathy, Hesed. We came here to remind you that every paper you sign writes a future for Somion, who doesn't get to sit in this room. Long silence followed. The judge didn't speak. The world watched, breathless. Justice Halburn had been silent for a long time. Known for his cold legomind, he hadn't shown emotion for 30 years on the bench. But now, as Traoré laid out the final photo, a burial sit with 20 tiny graves, something cracked. His pen dropped. Captain, he said softly, what would you have us do? Traoré stepped closer. Rewrite thoroughly, he said. Ankh acknowledged that desperation is not a crime. Make refugee a human right, not a paperwork privilege. A single tear rolled down Halburn's cheek. I've never seen it like this. Traoré nodded. That's the problem, Your Honor. The world never sees us until we are dead. A pause. But you can't choose to change that today. All across the globe, the live stream comments exploded. I can't stop crying. This is history in the making. This man speaks for millions of voiceless souls. The moderator looked at her tablet. Over 23 million people are now watching and climbing. What had begun as a routine legal session had become a global reckoning, and Traoré was just getting started. Just as the court was ready to break for us, a quiet voice interrupted. Your Honors, I was there. A young man stood at the back of Figulary. He wore a refugee camp badge. Security began to move toward him, but Traoré raised a hand. Let him speak. The room froze. His name was Daniel Ake, 19 years old, Ethiopian, former refugee, one of the few who made it across the Mediterranean alive. I saw babies in the water, Daniel said, his voice cracking. I helped bury 5 people. 2 of them were girls my age. He held up a photograph. His sister Marin smiling beside him before they left Addis Ababa. She didn't make it. The entire courtroom was silent. Daniel turned toward the judges. I'm not asking you to feel sorry. I'm asking you to stop making decisions that kill people like my sister. The moderator's voice broke when shackled for silence. But the damage had been done. Traoré placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. This court just heard the most honest statement in its history, he said softly, and millions watching on the neckreed with them. Traoré stepped forward with something new in hand. A sealed brown envelope. He held it up before the judges. This was not meant for your eyes, but the world has the right to see it. He pulled out a classified memo sent from a Western ambassador to their home government. Subject: Refugee Overflow Strategy. Traoré read aloud. If refugee crossings reign high, we may allow stricter rejections via legal loopholes, particularly for African nationals. Their governments are less likely to turn out legal opposition. The room fell into stunned silence. You knew, Traoré said. You all knew this policy wasn't based on law. It was based in the assumption that no one would stand up for Africa. Turned toward the cameras. Yao seemed wrong. Justice Halburn visibly flinched. The moderator covered her with. Live stream comments poured in. This feels like a movie, but it's real. This is systemic racism exposed on live air. He's risking everything to protect. The forgotten. One judge even whispered to another. We're losing control. No, they weren't losing control. They were losing the moral ground beneath their feet. and Traoré was lighting Thefire. Traoré paused. He looked into the audience, into the cameras. "I want to show you something." He bent down and opened a small black box. Inside a pair of tiny mud-caked baby shoes. These belonged to a 1-year-old boy named Fidel. His mother carried him across the desert. He died of dehydration 20 kilometers from a safe zone. Traoré held up the shoes. "Do you know what broke me? It wasn't that he died. It was that his mother carried these shoes even after Epis." A single sob echoed in the courtroom. Because she couldn't let go, because she believed somehow that someone in Thule would care. He looked at the justices. "Will you prove her right, or will you prove her fear true?" The moderator stood frozen. "One." Judge broke down quietly, tears streaming down his cheeks. Outside the court, thousands had gathered. Some knelt, some raised placards, and inside millions of living rooms, classrooms, and phones, people wept. This wasn't just about police anymore. This was about humanity itself. And Captain Ibrahim Traoré was giving it back, one truth at a time. Justice Eleanor Quinn had not spoken all day. A respected senior figure in international law. She had quietly observed every testimony, every photo, every fact Traoré delivered. But as he finished holding up Fidel's shoes, something in her cracked. "Captain," she said suddenly, her voice soft but trembling, "do you believe Weaver cared?" The courtroom turned sharply to her. "Do you believe this system ever intended to save lives like his?" Traoré stepped forward. He didn't shout. He didn't point fingers. He just said, "Not once. Not until today." She looked down. Her hands were shaking. Tears dropped silently onto the bench. The moderator, visibly stunned, paused the session. Cameras caught everything. A wave of emotions rippled through the internet. A judge just broke down. This is historic. He's not just speaking. He's healing wounds we didn't know we had. Trial rays. Changing hearts in real time. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, people started holding candles for Fidel, for all the invisible children. For the first time, the court wasn't just listening. It was beginning to feel. During a brief recess, Traoré wested into a private room. His phone was buzzing. Hundreds of missed calls, but one number stood out. It was Ghanaian country code. Unknown. He hesitated, then answered, "Hello." A fragile voice spoke. "Is this Captain True? I saw my son's face on your screen." He sat up straight. "Your name, ma'am?" "Esaba. As a BAU. My son Cam was on one of the boats that sank near Lampedusa. I never saw him again." Traoré's throat tightened. "I remember. Wayne had a red scarf. The Coast Guards found it." Silence, then sobs. "They told me no one cared. But today, he heard my boy's name in your mouth. And suddenly, I felt like he lived again." His eyes welled up. "He does. Ma single quotes M. Every story I tell is for children like him." "Then keep speaking," she said. "Don't stop, please." He returned to the courtroom differently, more grounded, more urgent, more human. And as he stepped back to the podium, he looked into the camera forward, for they're still waiting. This is no longer just testimony. This is a cry for justice. As the next session began, an unusual sound echoed outside. It wasn't shouting. It was singing. Thousands of protesters had gathered outside the International Tribunal. But no, they weren't chanting slogans. They were singing a West African lullaby. Live drones captured the moment from Neski. A sea of candles, faces lit by phone screens, a banner stretching across the courthouse wall. Dignity for all refugees. Inside the courtroom, the moderator paused to acknowledge it. Traoré turned to the judges. "You may not remember their names, but the world now knows them." The camera panned to Justice Halburn, who had fiercely defended the court's neutrality. His jaw wascled. His notes trembled. Finally, he said, "What do you want from us?" Traoré looked straight ahead. Not mercy, not pity, just a ruling that remembers we're all human. Then the door opened. A small girl entered. She walked to Theodable and placed a folded drawing, asin, a boat, and a smiling family. The girl didn't speak, but her silence screamed. She was one of the survivors, and the court could no longer pretend not to see her. The courtroom was silent. Hours had passed since closing bronx. The judges returned from deliberation. "We have reached a decision," said Justice Quinn, her voice unsteady. "For decades, this court has turned its face from the cries of the vulnerable." Theron leaned forward. "But today, because of truth and because of Captain Troy, we can no longer pretend ignorance." She paused. The U.S. Supreme Court's ruling denying protections to African refugees issued by condemned in this court of global conscience. Gasps effective immediately. We call for the reversal of asylum bans, the investigation of discriminator peace, and the establishment of an African Refugee Justice Fund, led by Captain Tro. Camera. Lights flashed. Reporters scrambled. Tro stood, stunned. This wasn't a symbolic ruling. It was real change. Outside, the crowd erupted in tears. Bells rang in Burkina Faso. Evan schools in Kenya stopped class to announce it. A refugee girl named Zarain Libya, watching on a shared phone, whispered, "We matter now." And for the first time across nations, it felt true. After the verdict, Trey was asked if he had anything left to say. He nodded. He stepped forward slowly and looked at the crowd, then at the cameras. "This isn't about winning. This is about seeing." He held up a photo. A Sam-worn picture of Fidel, the boy Hodron holding his sister's hand. He was 7. He wanted to become a pilot. His only crime was dreaming in the wrong place. He paused. "We are not asking the world to save us. We're asking the world to stop stepping on us." Tears rolled down faces in the courtroom. Reporters, translators, even a few guards. "I speak not only for Burkina Faso. I speak for every child sea swallowed, for every mother hocused. Her child goodbye at the border and never saw them again." He turned, took a deep breath. Justice is not what you say on paper. It's what you do when no one is watching. But today, everyone is watching. That single line became a trending quote in 49 countries. The video hit 74 million views in 48 hours, and his story remembered every second of it. As Trey walked down the steps of the courthouse, a small figure ran through the crowd. It was the little girl who had silently placed her drawing on the courtroom table. Her name was Samira, a refugee alone in Europe. She stopped in front of him, out of breath, eyes wide. "You made them listen," she whispered. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him and held him tight. Cameras got it. The hug, the emotion, final sense, it went everywhere. The hut that broke the internet. CNN, the world is a new hero. BBC, Captain Try didn't just speak. He healed. Al Jazeera, Fatog did what no headline could. It made the pain real, the healing visible, and the world could no longer look away. Dear viewer, if this story moved your heart, if your eyes filled with tears, if even for one moment you saw the humanity in every child like Fidel or Samira, please like this video. It helps the story reach more hearts. Drop a comment, even just to let the world know you're watching. Subscribe, because we will keep telling the stories others try to silence. Let's not just go viral. Let's go human. Thank you for being part of this moment. That justice is only possible when someone refuses to stay silent.